That was the beginning of Finland. So I was not going to do it because I was still talking about Taiwan. Anyways, I was just telling you that I'm not an expert on the vocational system. I guess I was picked because I was able to conduct a discussion in English. You guys will have to help me out, all of you, especially the Taiwanese part. I was also warned that since there will be a lot of teachers from this school, the Songshan Vocational School, who are vocational teachers, you guys are the experts. And also, I don't want to say anything I don't know. I don't want to say anything too sensitive. Let's put it this way. So I'm going to let you guys tell me more about the Taiwanese vocational system. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring you the Finnish system from Finland and the German system, okay? And we can do a compare contrast. Okay, no? Okay. First of all, the history of the vocational system, okay? It seems like from my research, the vocational system history in Taiwan obviously started with the Kuomintang coming to Taiwan in 1945, 1949, okay? But that's just Taiwan, okay? I think the important thing is because I think we're trying to do better, we're trying to do well, we're trying to excel just like in South Korea. I think they're pretty well known in Asia for their vocational system. We want to excel as well, and we want to see and figure out which ways we can be really good at it, okay? But I just want to start off by telling you that the vocational system is closely linked to European history, okay? And in European history, in the High Middle Ages, that's in the 11th, 12th, 13th centuries. That's from the year 1000 to the year 1200. The European social economic system was organized in a system called feudalism, okay? And by feudalism, we're referring to the fact that the kings and queens and the lords, the nobility, they owned and they organized essentially everything. They owned everything, and the peasants are the farmers, okay? The peasants, the farmers were closely linked to the workers. They were the lower working classes, okay? And so during this time, the workers didn't have many rights, and they were exploited by the noble people, and they didn't have any guarantees in their professional life. So they started getting together, and when these farmers and workers and artisans got together, they joined into groups, professional groups, and they joined by trades, by what they did. And each of these trades were called guilds. They were called guilds, okay? These guilds eventually evolved into professional organizations that not only guarantee the product for the consumers, but the guilds would also guarantee the wages, the salary. The guilds would guarantee the workmanship, the quality of the work. It guaranteed the standard of who joined the guilds, who could become an apprentice, somebody who was learning, and who would be licensed to finally become a full master, somebody who could produce his or her own products. Okay, and these were eventually become guilds, and the guilds would become later on colleges and universities. Okay, let me start off. Actually, I'm going to take off the PowerPoint because I'm going to play the first YouTube section. I'm going to play a YouTube section of 6 minutes. Okay, and that will explain the history of the guild. Okay, and when we come back, we'll talk a little more, because the reason is the guilds is what evolve into vocational, educational, and apprentice systems in Europe, okay? Especially in Germany, okay? Okay, so let me play the YouTube. 1 second. If I can figure it out. 1 second.
Expected to be unquestioningly loyal to the king. In exchange...
Can you hear that?
Yes.
Okay, let me make it larger.
Thank you.
Nobles were to control over. The life of a commoner in the High Middle Ages wasn't easy. By High Middle Ages, we were referring to a period of time that spans from around the 11th century to the 13th century. In Western Europe, feudalism was a system of government This means the higher classes were royals and nobles who owned land, and the lower classes were those who worked on the land. The landowners were expected to be unquestioningly loyal to the king. In exchange, the noble was granted control over his land and the peasants who lived and worked on it. Peasants worked to maintain the land and pay taxes and rent to their lord. Feudalism was not very beneficial to the lower classes, and there was little chance a peasant would ever move up in the social ranks. In the High Middle Ages, taxes grew along with an increase in trade and foreign military campaigns. No single peasant had much of a say about the oppression, but a group of peasants with a common voice was more readily heard. As peasants, who shared commonality in the product they sold or made, formed into an organized group, they became known as guilds. Guilds created standards for their products and regulations for sale. Guilds provided a means for a person to move higher in the social class system. The guild set standards for the products of its members and also for the means by which they were compensated. Guilds could grant protection to their members against high taxes or rent forced upon them by their lords. A guild could fix the price of a product and prevent any advertisement or price reductions to stop competition among craftsmen and merchants. In doing so, the guild not only provided protection to its members, but also to consumers. Quality standards of the products offered also ensured consumers would not be taken advantage of. Craftsmen and merchants weren't allowed to trade products with people who were not members. Guilds also provided care for members who became sick and protected them while they traveled. Similar to modern unions, they also petitioned for good working conditions and reasonable working hours. Guilds also helped with the cost of funerals for its members and helped provide care for orphans and workers who became disabled. Some supported education for its members as well. At the time, most of the schools were held in monasteries and were only used to educate clergy. As trade increased and the demand for literacy and commoners for record-keeping grew, church schools could no longer handle the educational needs of the people. Some of the earliest secular schools were supported by guilds. In addition to caring for the sick and disabled, guilds also helped build buildings and protective barriers around villages and towns. They provided military assistance against any foreign invaders and monitored the town for criminal activity. The members were thought to have high ethical and moral standards and expected to avoid any corruptive behavior. Each guild had its own official charter. The charter was the legislative grant written by the government that identified the group as a guild. In having official status, guilds were able to enforce rules on their members. Merchant guilds controlled the way trade was conducted in a town. They enforced rules like bans on trading with non-members. Some merchant guilds became very powerful, and their members were able to obtain higher social positions in their towns. Some held office within their cities while also representing their guild. As members could climb to the hierarchical ranks in a guild to help their social status, membership consistently increased. As the number of members in merchant guilds grew, so did the number of guilds. The merchant guilds became so powerful that they started to create regulations over unrepresented individual craftsmen and traders. The regulations created a need for the craftsmen to create their own guilds to protect themselves. Craft guilds were created to protect craftsmen and traders against merchant guilds. They worked much in the way of the merchant guilds, shielding members from excessive taxes and providing care and protection for its members. Guilds were formed by people who produced the same type of product. Some of the guilds formed at this time include the following: bakers, masons, painters, apothecaries, candle makers, clothers, tanners, and cobblers. Although craft guilds attempted to regulate the number of members, the guilds grew in number and size very quickly. A hierarchy developed to regulate members. The newest members of a guild were known as apprentices. Apprentices were developing skills within their craft and learning the ways of business. They were given training by the guild along with food and shelter. If an apprentice was successful, he would then reach the second level of the craft guild and be known as a journeyman. Journeymen were paid a small wage while they got better food and a slightly higher quality of shelter. If a journeyman met with success, he could reach the highest level of the hierarchy, the master. In order to become a master, a journeyman's work had to be examined by other masters. If the masters approved of the journeyman's work, he could have his own shop. This would give him the level of master in his guild. As we briefly learned before, the educational structure was changing in Western Europe in the High Middle Ages. Crusaders who were fighting a holy war in the Near East returned from battle with manuscripts written by famous Greek philosophers like Aristotle and Plato. These texts were normally only available to monks who copied them for preservation rather than for education. Now that secular schools were developing, these classical documents were used to teach many people how to reason and debate ideas with each other. Education advanced quickly under the classical structure, and masters began to form their own guilds. These guilds were known as universitas, which was a Latin term that meant a group of people associated into one body. You might think of these as scholastic guilds. These groups enforced educational standards on their students and teachers. This was the beginning of the modern university. Feudalism in the High Middle Ages created an unending oppression for peasants. In order to have a better voice and stop unfair treatment, craftsmen and tradesmen banded together to organize guilds. Guilds offered a means by which a commoner could increase his place in the social hierarchy. Merchant guilds were formed to protect its members and regulate trade. As merchant guilds grew bigger and more powerful, they began to take advantage of individual craftsmen. The craftsmen then began to form their own guilds called craft guilds. Craft guilds worked to protect its members from overregulation and to set standards for the products produced. Additionally, scholars began to form guilds to regulate educational standards and protect students and teachers. These guilds were referred to as universitas and led to the creation of modern universities.
Okay, I just posted on the whiteboard. I just posted on the whiteboard a link to the Webster Dictionary definition of the word guild. Okay, so I just share with you. Can you guys hear me? Am I clear? Can someone say something? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Sorry. So I just shared with you guys 6 minutes of that video on guilds, and I think for those of you who weren't experts or knowledgeable in the vocational school system, you probably didn't know anything about European guilds. Okay, and there's the guild, as you can see in the English dictionary. Guild is an association of people with similar interests or pursuits, especially for the craftsmen during the Middle Ages, the medieval ages. Okay, and you just saw in the video what that was all about. Okay, so the professional guilds, as the video told you, it began because the farmers, the working class, didn't have any protection of their own wages, of their own interests, and they bound together for their own benefits. And then they divided by their professional expertise. Okay, and then many guilds were formed. Eventually, these guilds became so professional that they actually created centers of learning, including taking manuscripts of the Greeks, as you saw from Aristotle and Plato, that were lost during the Middle Ages. They were brought back from the Middle East because the Muslims had taken them because they thought them valuable. And the Europeans eventually began again studying and teaching. And so finally leaving the churches. It was the churches and the monasteries originally that were the centers of learning in Europe. But after the churches, the centers of learning moved on, and it moved to the guilds people. Okay, so the guilds people, I think in Taiwan we tend to think of workers or vocational people as people who just work with their hands, people who are skilled in a specific art. But in Europe, as you can see from the video, the vocational people were the ones who cared about special expertise and learning, and they're the ones who set up the foundations for the universitas, like they said, universities. Okay, so eventually, of course, we know that now in Germany, you have the universities of higher learning, and you also have the vocational track system, especially their two-track system. Okay, but all of them evolved from what the guild people had set up. Okay, okay, good. So now let me go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, let me go back to the PowerPoint. Does anyone have any comment on the video we just watched? Did anyone find anything interesting that they just realized from the video? No? Okay, good. So there's the PPT. So we're gonna start with Finland, okay? And Finland is has been by all standardized tests always in the top 10 in terms of their vocational training, okay? They're known for the Finnish people are unique in the sense that they really place a lot of pride and respect in their children's decision making. Okay, I think in Taiwan there's a culture of learning in which we want the kids to listen, obey, and take notes. But in Finland, the reason I picked Finland is because in Finland, more so than Germany, in Finland they don't teach authority. They teach imagination. They teach freedom. They want the kids to develop their own sense of freedom, their own sense of thinking. Okay, and so in Finland, kids are asked from a very early age, even in grade school, what are your interests? What would you like to do? How would you like to do it? Okay, so Finland's ranked in the top 10 for their vocational education system, and they offer almost something in every field. Okay, as you can see in the PowerPoint, these are the different specialties that Finland offers in most of their vocational schools. Okay, specialty in agricultural science, agroscience. Okay, specialty in forest science, forestry. Okay, then the second line there you see business, like business administration, then public administration, and even legal studies, law. Okay, it's interesting because for us these are not vocational items like law. You think they're university items, but in Finland they also offer studies in law or clerking in their vocational schools. Okay, then they have education, they have health and welfare, so health sciences. Okay, anything related to public health. Then they have humanities and arts. Okay, those are the social sciences. Okay, then they have the information and communication technologies. Okay, so this is more like the IT science. Okay, and then the natural sciences, kind of like in biology, and then the service industries. Okay, so this is now in the service sector. Okay, hold on. All right, skip. Sorry. Okay, and then the social sciences, and finally technology. Okay, okay, let's go to the next PowerPoint slide. Okay, so that's the map of Finland right here. Okay, you can see that's a map of Finland. Okay, there's I read about vocational qualification. Okay, so in other words, when you go to these vocational schools and you take all these subjects, eventually you will be qualified and you will have a qualification if you pass the tests. Okay, they usually have two exams. They have one exam in the middle of their studies. Okay, that midterm qualification is not reflected in their final grades. The final grades would not show that. That's just for their self-assessment to see how well they're doing. Okay, and then finally, when they get to the end, they will have an assessment that is it's like a skill test, knowledge test, and it's usually done by the trade in question, the experts, as well as the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce and their particular trade will get together and make that particular test. Okay, and that test, if they pass it, will lead to a vocational qualification that would lead to a professional qualification or further career stages, meaning they can continue on to further specialization in their field. Okay, okay. Now, for those who already have a qualification or have gained skills or know-how through work, for example, some people, they don't need to go to vocational school because they have been an electrician or a plumber or a carpenter for many years. They do not want to go back to school from square one. So for those who already have a qualification or gain skills through their actual hands-on work, they can have further education and testing through a competence-based qualification. Okay, can you guys see now? Okay. So Finland has consistently, with their programs, after their testing, they have placed in the top 10 positions in most standardized tests for over a decade. Okay, they're obviously a role model for others to emulate in both their programs and their testing. Emulate means to copy. Okay, evidenced by a system of flexible curricula. They're very flexible curricula, and they have many ways to get to the final destination. In other words, they have many pathways to take you to the final goal. You don't have to follow a specific way. There are many ways. You can even go to a vocational school system first, and then from there to university, get the knowledge you need, and then come back to the vocation you would like. Okay, and almost none of them have any dead ends, and virtually all of them have full graduation rates. Okay, the programs are designed with a concurrent dual track system. They have one track in traditional courses. That usually takes about 2 days out of 5 days of the week. 2 out of 5, they would have this traditional course in like a school setting. And then they would have 3 days out of 5 in placements in person and labor fields. Sometimes it wouldn't be 2 and 3. Sometimes it would be a week here. For example, I read about France. In France, it's all equal. In France, it would be 1 day, 1 week at the school, 1 week at the placement. Or they would do 1 month at the school and 1 month at the placement. Okay? Okay, I'll just do my best. Next. Okay, so upon completion, the students can either enter the labor market right away, or they can, like I said, transition to universities, and from there they can take further studies, and some of them will come back later on to the vocational system. Okay, I want to talk about the great social capital that you see on there. By social capital, I mean that all stakeholders are the people who have something at stake in this whole process. Okay, whether it's the teachers, the parents, the students, or the employers, or the students themselves. Okay, the Finnish system is characterized by great social capital. All the stakeholders have full faith in the excellence of the program. Okay, what does that mean? It means that the programs are so well designed that if you enroll in those programs, and they're pretty much uniform throughout the country from north to south, east to west, if you enroll in those programs, once you complete the program, everyone knows how excellent you are. And so by that, they're talking about social capital. Okay? So when I was reading the studies on social capital, they're referring to how everybody had great faith in the value of the degree. Just like in East Asia, like in Taiwan, a lot of the businesses are done because of social capital. Why? Because you place trust in each other. Okay, and trust is what pushes the economy along. Okay, very good. So there are around 100 majors. Okay, so what do you want to study? Well, in Finland, in Germany, they talk about over 300 majors. In Finland, they said 100. Okay, such as marketing, hospitality. Earlier, there were the bigger areas like forestry and all that. Now we're going into the more specific ones. Okay, marketing, hospitality, hairdressing, culinary science. One of their top schools is called Omnia. Okay, and about half the students at Omnia are actually adults. They're not even young people. They are working people, adults who decide to go back for further training. Okay, and so Omnia is like a school that reflects the typical Finland, a vocational school in Finland. And there in Omnia, they have half of them as adults. On top of the traditional lecture classes, they have internships and they have workshops, okay, in all kinds of expert fields, in the carpentry, in construction, in health professions, and in mechanics. Okay, vocational schools operate on site, okay, and they feature the products of the enrolled students. Okay, so what does this mean? I was reading about how at the vocational schools, when you enter the vocational schools, they already have like a store, a shop. And in those shops, they sell, guess what? The products that their students make themselves. So you don't even need to graduate. As soon as you're in the programs, they teach you how to make products, and you're proud of your products because they are sold immediately in their gift stores, not gift stores, in their shops, okay? The profit it generates will be channeled back into the school, into the next class of students, and also partly shared with the students who made the products, okay? So that's something interesting I read about the vocational schools in Finland. Like everything is essentially user-friendly, okay? From the moment that you're a little kid, they're already asking what you would like to do, to when you join the vocational school, you have all these fields you can pick, okay? You're not excluded from almost any field just because you went to vocational school. And once you enter the vocational school, essentially they immediately get you hands-on to make things, and then they would sell them right there to generate profit for yourself and for the next class, okay? Let's go to the next slide, okay? So in Finland, many profitable projects will group students together from different fields so that they can use their synergy. Now, what is synergy? In English, the word synergy means you join together the energy of different people, and that is called synergy, synergistic, the adjective, okay, synergy, okay. So use the synergy of many people to create impressive final works for sale. Profits will be reinvested again in future projects. Okay, so what does that mean? Let me give an example. They may say, okay, well, let's build a beautiful house and have it all interiorly decorated. Okay, so they would actually go and get students. We're talking about the vocational schools of these young people. Okay, they're not going to get full-fledged architects. They're getting all these students to join together, students from every field, and they would get together and each one would do what they're good at. So someone who's good at carpentry will be designing the furniture and the interior design. Somebody who's good with masonry would be helping with, you know, the bricks, the laying of the bricks and the actual building of the house. I guess they don't have earthquakes there, so they don't have to worry too much about earthquakes, okay? And once they get all of them together, they will not only give each student the experience and the pride of working on what they're learning, but when they finally get together, all these experts, and put together the final product, they're going to sell it, okay? And so they're not waiting for you to graduate. They're actually already creating big projects, okay, from the very beginning, okay? Let's see, let's skip out again. Okay, so let's go to this final slide on Finland. Okay. Okay, and so I want to end Finland by talking about how the nation, the government, invests up to 8,000 euros annually on each student. I don't know why I cannot get rid of that, because when I get rid of it, I close the PowerPoint, as you saw before. I couldn't get rid of that message at the bottom. The country invests about 8,000 euros. 8,000 euros annually on each student. And that's a total of 5.7% of the Finnish GDP. In other words, close to 6% of the entire nation's gross domestic product is invested every year in the education of their students. Okay? So, as you can see, they offer a lot of choices. They offer, obviously there's a two-track system, and I'm going to talk more about it in the next hour because Germany is known for the two-track system. So I'm not ignoring the two-track system. I'm just going to talk about it in the second hour. Okay, so we'll do that in the next hour. Okay, so I would like to open up the last few minutes to you guys to see who would like to make some comments comparing to Taiwan, because I decided instead of me talking about Taiwan, since a lot of you are experts, maybe you can do a comparison of what I talked about and what Taiwan is like. Okay? So, anyone would like to make a comment about how the Finnish system compares to the Taiwanese vocational system? Okay? Anyone? Go ahead. Don't all speak at the same time. Okay, well, let's start with a question that's more specific. Does someone know what percentage of the GDP or how much money does the Taiwanese government pour into the vocational school system in Taiwan? Can someone tell me about that? No one? Okay, what about the vocational school systems? How many vocational schools are there in Taiwan? Because I was told that there are several of them, and there's a 5-year Wuzhuan, so I don't quite understand why they have the 3-year and the 5 years. Someone must know the answer to that. Okay, I was told that we're supposed to have some interaction too. Not everyone just sit there with their mouth shut. Does someone want to contribute? Okay. What's the reputation in terms of the vocational school system and as compared to the university system in Taiwan? Okay, can someone speak up, please? You have 5 minutes. What's the reputation in Taiwan for going to a certain vocational system? Are they gaining reputation, or are they kind of stuck in the same level? Okay, I thought you guys are from a vocational school. Isn't the Songshan School a vocational school?
Yes, Songshan School is a first-rated school.
First-rate vocational school, right? Okay,
Yes.
so could you share a little bit about the Taiwanese system, because I'm not familiar with the Taiwanese system.
Well, Taiwanese system, teacher, you mean like the educational or?
Just yeah, like well, how many types of vocational schools are there in Taiwan? Do you have so many majors as in Finland, like hundreds of them? When do you who enrolls in them? Can adults go back and enroll in them like in Finland? Is there a certification like in Finland, after which with the social capital you're guaranteed almost a job? Also in Finland, they said that the regional government the school would go and find placements. Like they would go find the employers and see who needs how many people in those positions. So before you enroll in the program in Finland, they will actually go, the schools and the local government will go and find out if you're going to study something that's useful. If nobody has a need for you, they will actually liaise and talk to another region and actually dispatch you. They will send you 200 kilometers away and say, okay, go study there, because when you finish, you have a placement ready for you. Okay? So in other words, not only are they helping you get a good education, in Finland, the schools and the local governments try very hard to make sure that upon graduation, you have a job waiting for you. Okay? Does Taiwan do that?
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Okay. So, what would you say would be the best highlight then of the Taiwanese system?
In Taiwanese system, schools just highlight every subject that they told their students, like Chinese, English, or history, something like that.
Okay. But what's the purpose of the vocational system? Isn't it to train you in a specific technique and skill so you have a job waiting for you when you graduate? Isn't that the purpose in Taiwan?
Well, students can choose your major during your master, or when you are university students, you can your major, and you could think what do you want to do in the future as your work. So
Okay.
yes.
When do students decide what's their major? When they enter the program, or as they're in the program, they decide?
They have to take the exam, and the degree, no, the grade will influence which school and major they can choose.
Okay. Okay, I think we're supposed to take a 10-minute break, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we're back at 3 o'clock. Everyone, take a 10-minute break. We'll be back at 3.
Okay.
Thank you, teacher.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is just the formalization of their vocational school system, but this is actually a continuation of what they had been doing for essentially, 1,000 years. 1,000 years since the Middle Ages. Okay. And so the law simply codified it. In other words, what they want to do is they want to make it uniform throughout Germany. They wanted every region, every guild, every professional trade to have the same professional standards. So pretty much kind of like in Finland, where it would be uniform. The standards will be uniform. Remember, talk about social capital. Well, the same. They have social capital and they have legality. Okay, so in Germany, it's clearly codified in law, and the professional training programs are organized, obviously, by guilds. Okay, as you can see there, the law codified the system nationwide to ensure the uniformity for the dual track system. Okay. German vocational distribution. Okay, so actually in the vocational school system, not the high school system, but in their vocational school system, they're divided into 3 different groups. Okay, 1/3 of the students would enroll in pre-vocational training programs. Now, what does that mean, pre-vocational? From what I was reading, some students weren't very qualified, or they were children of immigrants. They were immigrants themselves. I guess children of immigrants will speak perfect German. These were the immigrant kids, the kids who maybe weren't born in Germany. They came from Turkey, came from other European countries, came from, they came as refugees. Okay, 1/3 of them would enroll in pre-vocational training programs. Some of them are actually pure German, but maybe they just weren't so well prepared. So they would enroll in these pre-vocational programs. Okay. The other third would enroll in school-based programs, and these are essentially like the traditional school programs. Okay. So these are in the school-based programs, 22% of them, and then 45% of them will enroll in the dual-track system. So when we think of Germany, everyone thinks of the dual-track system. Actually, it's actually inaccurate. Not all German vocational kids are in the dual-track system. In fact, only half of them are. The other half are not in the dual-track system. Okay, so the 22% are in just the traditional classrooms. They are vocational programs, but in traditional classrooms, no hands-on experience. Then there'll be 1/3 in the pre-vocational, so they're even getting ready for the vocational system. They're not good enough. Okay, so that's the distribution for the students. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so in addition to in the dual track system, in addition to the internships that they would be assigned to, the guilds, remember, we just talked about the guilds in the YouTube video, the guilds and the chambers of commerce would organize workshops to compensate for bias at an individual company. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, it's very interesting. I thought this was a point worth highlighting because you enroll in a 2-track system and you'll be assigned to a specific craft, specific company for training, but they think that that specific company would be biased. That specific company would be biased and give you kind of like training that's only good for that company, okay? So in order for you to get a full training that's not biased, the guilds, in other words, whatever you're trying to be, the guilds and the chambers of commerce of your city, they would get together. These are the people who, just like in Finland, would create those exams for you for the final certification. Well, the same people, the guilds and the chambers of commerce, would organize workshops, okay? Workshops for everyone to go like every few months or once a year, okay? To make the long story short, in Germany, it is not enough for you to be placed in a dual track system with a company that will teach you, because they think those companies may only teach you particular certain skills, or they may teach it to you with a bias that's beneficial to that company, but not beneficial to the whole system, to the whole guild, to the whole trade. So they would spend money and time and expertise creating workshops so that, okay, so let's say that 100 students are placed at 100 companies, but periodically the chambers of commerce and guilds would organize these workshops in which all of you 100 will come back. And we're not talking about back to your school. We're talking about workshops organized by the Chamber of Commerce and the guild, means your specific craft. And there they would give you neutral training. In other words, training so that you're not biased. Okay? Okay. This is kind of like before with Finland. Also, halfway through the training, they would also give you a self-assessment, and the grades don't count until the final certification, just like in Finland. Okay. And this is what I was telling you. The trade group will organize a final exam that would certify your successful completion. Okay. That's why I said that I only picked Germany and Finland, because they almost are like copycats of each other. Both are super successful. And when I was reading about other countries, even down to South Korea, they were copying all the German model. Okay, so that's why I know we're trying to compare different countries, but it seems like these European countries are the ones everyone's trying to copy. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay. Okay, so just like in Finland, in addition to the vocational qualifications, there are qualifications for working adults. So once again, remember in Finland, half the class was composed of working people. Well, kind of probably a lower proportion but in Germany also, working adults can also come and get qualified, okay, for specific vocational qualification, okay? Same as in Finland, the adult would need to have a job where he or she can prove his qualification, okay? Good. Now, with over a century of vocational training history, okay, so now they're talking about the more specific modern training, okay, because I told you guilds have been around for 1,000 years. But in the terms of, remember, the law was passed in 1969, but the modern vocational training in Germany has been going on for over a century, okay? So Germany, obviously today, ranks as the preeminent leader in the labor force, okay? What it does is it cross-pollinates. Cross-pollinates means they take two strands, like for pollen, and they merge them together, and that's called cross-pollination, okay? So what do they merge? They merge theoretical knowledge with practical training, okay? In fact, due to the pandemic, almost every country has suffered significantly, and the youth unemployment has shot up in almost every country. And I was reading that Germany is the least affected by all this pandemic because they have been well trained and well placed, so they didn't suffer much from this pandemic. Okay. Its training is obviously premised. Premise means based on the assumption, premise on graduates not having to be trained by the employers, and thus can effectively perform and be a company asset from the get-go, thus reducing attrition rates. What does that mean? It means that the training of the German vocational system is so detailed and so thorough that when you graduate, and because you're placed in the two-track system, at least half of them, they are so well prepared that when they graduate, they don't need to be trained again. You don't need to be doing your internship after you graduate. You're ready to go. Okay? Okay. So one of the benefits of the German system is that students do not feel compelled to enroll at universities. They're likely to succeed, equally successful. In fact, I think almost more likely to get a job, okay, if you graduate from a vocational school than if you were to graduate from a university, okay? So students who opt not to enroll at universities are equally likely to succeed as a fully functional contributor to the labor force, okay? So the 3-year programs, they're all 3-year programs. The vocational system in Germany are based on the 2-3-year model. The 2-3 model, meaning the 2 days in the classroom, and then the 3 days of practical training. Like I said, in France, it's equal time. In Germany, it's more practical training than in the classroom. So they use what they call a 2-3 model. What about Taiwan? Can someone tell me, in Taiwan at the vocational school, like at your reputable Songshan vocational school, what is the time distribution? Can someone tell me, or the teacher before? What's the time distribution? Is it a 2-3 model? No one could tell me? So anyways, in Europe, it's usually a 2-3 model, or equal model, equal time, okay? In terms of dual track advantages, okay? Let's talk about the advantages of the dual track system, okay? So a lot has been said about the dual track system. People believe that the German dual track system is the absolute best, okay? And that's because, okay, let's look at the advantages. One advantage is the fit between the student and the company workflow, okay? Company workflow refers to how things are done at the company. How do they do things, okay? The fit between the student and the company. So by having a dual track system, most of the students, the interns, will graduate, and they probably, unless they don't like the company, unless the company doesn't like them, and that's usually rarely the case, they will stay on as a full-timer, as a full-time employee at the company. Okay, so look at the benefit right there on the spot. Okay, from the get-go, from the very beginning, if you have spent 2 years, 3 years at the company, 3 days a week learning from your employer, how could there be not a close fit between the student and the company? Okay, so the biggest advantage is that they know each other well. Okay, also if the student is in the two-track dual-track mode, dual-track program, he or she can assess his own potential and willingness to do the work. What does that mean? Well, you know what the company does. Okay, you know how hard the job is. Are you able to do it? You're not only a student now, you're not only learning, but do you want to stay on as the employee? Because you can assess your own potential. Not only that, are you fit for this trade? Are you fit for this job? Okay. Willingness, are you willing? Okay. By willingness, in the research I read, they're referring to students. Well, I'm sure it happens. Are you willing to do all the things that your company demands that you do? Are you willing to do all the tasks required from the checklist? Okay, so right there, the dual track gives you that benefit that you clearly know how good you are at the job and how willing you are to do the job. Okay, the other benefit is the student is remunerated from the very beginning. Remunerated means paid. Okay, the student's paid a salary from the very beginning. Okay, so is that good? Well, there could be students who don't have the time and the money to be spending 3, 4, 5 years at school. Okay, so this could be a good way for them to learn and at the same time get paid. Okay, and I was reading about how the laws in Germany are so strict, even on how much you pay the students, that a lot of the companies did not want to join this program because essentially they were training the students for free, and they still had to pay the students by the set wages set by the government. Okay. Okay. Minimal recruitment costs. Okay. Well, one benefit is the recruitment costs. There's so few recruitment costs because you have been placed already at the company. Okay. I read that some of the companies found that the students they got were not up to par, not up to standards, so they were not satisfied. So now they actually pick the students they want. Okay. So the recruitment is not at the end of the graduation, the recruitment is at the beginning. Okay, do you want this student to come join your apprenticeship? Okay, because they were finding that some students just were not prepared in mathematics or in languages, or they were just not equipped in the basic fields of knowledge, so they couldn't do the job. Okay, but once they're recruited, there's minimal recruitment costs upon graduation. Okay. Of course, strong fit. There's a strong fit between the company and the employee. Okay, you are you have been there 2-3 years. There must be some kind of chemistry between the company and the employee. Okay, and the greatest thing about retaining the employee, the intern, is that you have invested so much money and time and training and effort in these students. Well, you know, the company investments would not be lost once the student graduates, because the student would stay on as a student, as an employee. Okay, good. So disadvantages. Okay, disadvantages. Well, companies are unwilling to take on apprentices due to complex regulations. I was telling you that increasingly the companies don't want, okay? The companies don't want to be, a lot of them, not all of them, don't want to be part of this dual track system because there's so many codified legal regulations that is troublesome. In other words, It's not like you just take someone and do whatever you want. There are many laws, all codified in German legislation. Okay, so a lot of them are unwilling. Okay, the next point is what I was telling you before. A lot of these companies found that for one reason or another, these kids were not well prepared to even join their companies. These are companies that are highly specialized. So it's not easy to take someone and demand and ask them to do something when they're missing all these fields of knowledge. So a lot of them are just not prepared to even join the companies. Okay, a lot of students, even if they are accepted, they can't keep up with the workflow. Okay, a lot of the work is so demanding and so difficult that these students are 14, 15, 16, 17. They're not ready. They cannot keep up. So they cannot keep up with the workflow. Okay. Companies are too specialized. That's the other problem. They're too specialized and unable to train the students in all areas of expertise required for the test. For example, let's say you're making microscopes, biological microscopes for the lab. Okay. Do you honestly think it's that easy to make a microscope? Okay. So now you have a student who comes in. This kid really doesn't even have a high school education yet. And you expect this kid to understand enough of the physics, of the chemistry, of light, of all the things you need to know to help. So the companies are too specialized. And so they actually cannot train the students in everything they need. Therefore, it defeats the purpose of having these students at the companies. Okay, so as you can see, these are disadvantages. I think when we talk about how great the German system is, we just think, oh, well, dual track, well, great, they get hands-on experience. Okay, but these disadvantages, these problems, guys, these are coming from the Germans themselves. Okay, these are coming from the German companies that were telling us of the possible problems themselves. Okay. Okay. Now, interesting question is, can the German model be exported? Okay. Okay. Well, the first point goes back to our point on the guilds, right? How long is the history of the guilds? You saw from the time of the farmers getting together, 1,000 years. The history of guilds and apprenticeships and their relationship and their tradition, this has been going on for 1,000 years. Okay. So I was reading about the the South Korean model and other countries, and essentially they cannot copy everything from Germany. They cannot copy this history of guilds in South Korea. There was no such thing. Okay, so it's hard to completely export the German model when you don't have that close relationship, when you don't have the expectations, the social capital. Okay. Federal and state governments must work closely with industries. Okay, why is this a point under can the German model be exported? Well, think about it. The Germans are very meticulous. They do everything perfectly. Okay, the guilds, the labor unions, the federal government, the state government, they all work in tandem. They all work together very closely with the particular industry. Okay. Now, it begs the question, can we do the same in Taiwan? Can our Taiwan government and the government of Taichung or the Taipei city and your schools and the professional guilds all work in unison without complaining about each other, without having political parties split you? Is that possible? Okay. So in Germany, when it comes to these vocational schools, everybody sings one song. They all see the same color. There's no political difference. They're all in unison. They all have the same goal, which is to make Germany number one. Okay, in other words, it's like Japan. They have this national cultural mentality that they're and South Koreans as well. And that's part of the reason the South Koreans are quite successful as well. Can we do the same in Taiwan? Okay, I'll leave that question to you guys after I finish the PowerPoint. Okay, hopefully you guys will talk a little more this time. Okay, high level of German education allowing for specialization and future challenges. Okay, needless to say, the German educational system is, like the Japanese say, ichiban, the best. Okay, they're so good. They're so disciplined. They got the best teachers, they got the best science, they got the best textbooks, and the greatest investment, just like in Finland, 8,000 euros invested per pupil. Okay, how much do we invest here in Taiwan per pupil? Okay, so that's what we're doing. High level of German education ensures the quality of their vocational school system. Okay, so these points are essentially telling us, can we do that? Okay, can we do the same as Germany? Okay. This other point is interesting. I would like your feedback when I finish. Okay. The apprenticeships, do they produce social stigmas as in other nations? Okay. Essentially, in Germany, in Finland, and Sweden, there's no stigma. The only stigma that you get from being an apprentice, being the vocational program, is a stigma of excellence. Okay, a stigma of excellence. In other words, stigma means stereotype, means association. Okay, do the people get associated with a value because of what they are doing? Okay, in Germany and in these European countries, to being an apprentice in a trade, in a vocational system, boosts your social status. It shows that you're hardworking. It shows that you're devoted. It shows that you have an expertise on hand. Okay. Well, can we say the same thing in South Korea and in Taiwan and Japan? Okay. Is there social stigma? And what I read was that in countries like Taiwan, there may be a stigma in the sense that the people who enter a vocational school are the ones who cannot succeed academically in a four-year university. In other words, they're not mentally good at studies, so they go into a vocation. And so the stigma there is negative in the sense that you're not the smartest or the most complete or the most talented. Whereas in Europe, not at all. There's zero stigma. It's all positive. Okay? Vocational schooling is all positive in Europe. Okay? And so that will give and take. It will contribute and take away from exporting the German model. Okay? Dual-track standardization. Okay? How do they standardize the dual-track system in Germany? Okay? There is a thing called cooperation between all levels of business. Okay? From the large companies to more so the medium and small size companies, there's close cooperation to standardize their work and their expectations. Okay? There's regulation and standards as defined by law. Excuse me. Okay? So a lot of the standards are defined by legislation in Germany. It's all codified. That means, as you can see there, there's a map of Germany. Okay? That's East and West Germany combined now into one country. There's a clear standard that's nationwide. You're not going to get a poorer standard in East Germany and a better, higher standard in West Germany. Not anymore. Okay? Everything is regulated by law. Okay? There's uniformity of certification across all industries and regions. Okay? This means that you're not going to get, you're not going to say, well, to be a carpenter, you need to have higher skills and standards. Oh, to be a plumber, you can just be anybody. No. Okay? The certification process is uniform. It's the same across all trades. They're all equally strict equally competitive, okay? And not only across all industries, but across all regions, okay? From north to south, east and west, the certification is the same. That helps in their dual track standardization, okay? Okay, and the certificates provide trust in graduates' competencies, okay? I think this was mentioned earlier in the previous hour with the Finnish model, the exact same. Like I said, if you analyze the two countries, there's not much difference. They're almost the same, and they're both the top, okay? Certificates, so certificates, meaning you have completed your program. The certificates provide trust in their competencies. If you have that piece of paper, the employer knows how good you are. And you're not going to get the piece of paper without passing that final exam that the Guild and Chamber of Commerce came up with, okay? So there's no second tier. There's no second tier schools. There's no diploma mill. What's a diploma mill? A diploma mill is when you actually print diplomas, okay? You just print diplomas. If you have money, you get it, okay? Okay, and the last point there, okay? Governments, employers, and unions coordinated for facing the digital landscape transformations, okay? So what they're doing is in Germany, because they know that the information age, the digital age is very competitive. Things change in the work, in the product, and the business environment all the time. So right now, their governments, the employers, and the unions, they are all closely coordinating for possible changes in digital technology transformation, okay? And so at any time, they are going to react flexibly to the challenges of digitization, okay? So this is what they're doing now in Germany, okay? And let's go on to the final slide, okay? So what challenges are there for the vocational school system in Germany and in Europe, okay? Excellence early on may not guarantee success in the long run due to lack of life experience, okay? So these are challenges that are coming up for the graduates, because they're so good at preparing these really young people with no experience, okay? So they're wondering now, how are they going to avoid problems in the future? Because a lot of these students are so young, they don't have any experience in life. They are only good at what they're taught in that specific field, but things change really fast. And even their life expectations change, okay? So essentially you have these well-prepared, well-taught, young little experts who are children, who are not, they're youthful. They're not prepared for all the vicissitudes, all the changes in life, okay? So excellence early on may not guarantee that success will be in the long run. So what are you gonna do for that? Okay, that's an interesting point. Because they're so good at preparing you in the beginning, now the problem for Germany is, well, are these people going to succeed later on? Okay, in fact, the skills will become obsolete. What does obsolete mean? Well, what the skills you use and need today may longer be useful or necessary later on. So the skills become obsolete, okay? How do you make sure all the graduates stay current on their skills, okay? And another question is unemployment, okay? One of the reasons these countries have very low youth unemployment is because they spend so much of their money and resources and energy training young people. Don't forget, in Finland, the training begins in grade school, elementary school, okay? They start asking you what you want to do, okay? Essentially in all these European countries, they focus so much energy and money, right? 8,000 euros per person on training the kid, okay? So the kids graduate when they're 19 or 20 and they have a job, full job waiting for them. But is that really a permanent job? Because as we just saw in the previous 2 points, skills become obsolete. Is that a permanent job? Is this the best way to reduce unemployment? Okay, because in Taiwan, our unemployment rate is what, 2-3%? Okay, well, in Western countries, unemployment of 4% is considered very good. Okay, so is this a good way to reduce unemployment by training a bunch of young people to start work very early? Okay, is that a good strategy? Okay, okay. So essentially, I have shown you what they do. I think after these 2 hours, you got an idea of what they're doing in Europe. Okay, and I was raised in Spain, so I read a lot of articles on Spain and Mexico and Latin America. Originally, I was going to do PowerPoints on Spanish-speaking countries, but I found out that they were just copying Germany and Norway and Finland and Sweden. Essentially, they're all copying the Nordic countries. So essentially, if I do a PowerPoint on those countries, the only thing I can add is how some countries failed. Okay, and I don't think you're that interested in how they failed. But essentially, you can see the overlaps, right? You can see from the 2 countries, Finland and Germany, here are the overlaps, okay? The governments spend a lot of time, money, caring about their youth. Second of all, the schools have a long tradition. Third of all, a lot of the vocational standards are codified in law. Okay? So they're all codified in law. The kids are prepared for work when they graduate, and a lot of them have had that experience with their employer, so when they go in, they are ready for it.